on grandfather's plantation next to the York River is heaven for Felicity. Is it? Well, okay, I get it. Felicity's hometown is Williamsburg. It's a bustling city, it's summer, it's Virginia, it's humid, it's hot. Yorktown is vaguely less hot. For example, Williamsburg is currently 88 degrees, while Yorktown is a balmy 82 degrees. That's not insignificant, so fine. Meteorologically, that makes sense. But are we kind of calling the plantation a resort? This is problematic for a lot of reasons unrelated to temperature. But okay, we're escaping the city to go to Grandpa's house for the summer. Sure, let's keep going. Grandfather's plantation was called Kings Creek Plantation. It was about halfway between Williamsburg and Yorktown. The fields, the slave quarters, and all the outbuildings of the plantation were on either side of the main house. Cool, so we're gonna talk about the slavery thing apparently. Excellent. Let's keep going. While the morning was still cool, Felicity and Grandfather inspected the green fields. She listened while Grandfather spoke to the field hands and the overseer about the weather. That's it. That's the last we hear about the enslaved people that lived on Grandfather's magical labor camp. Plantation. Unless we count the part where the slave catchers are sent after a wayward apprentice, but that's an entirely different can of worms. So there's Felicity just sitting there hanging out with her horse while Grandfather chats up the overseer while his enslaved field hands are doing their business. The fact that the next thing we read is Felicity's memory about freeing a horse from a cruel owner speaks volumes. Felicity is 10 years old by the time this book happens in 1775. She's not ignorant of the fact that her life has seriously benefited from the exploitation of other people. So why does our very outspoken Felicity sit idly by? Is she so incredibly blinded by privilege that she doesn't even stop to think about the atrocities that are happening around her? It's possible. The vast majority of colonists at this time probably felt that way. It's the status quo and we're not going to question it. I realize it would take a truly exceptional child to stand up to an adult, let alone a world full of adults who have been conditioned to think that owning other humans is the solution to a problem rather than the problem itself. But even our plucky Felicity would be no match for that whatsoever. But it's still a missed opportunity. All it would have taken is for Felicity to have acknowledged the distinct wrongness that is people being held against their will, whether they were treated well or not. It would have actually adhered to Felicity's character more strongly if she had raged against slavery, especially considering how upset she was about the treatment of a horse. So why didn't American Girl touch on any of this? The Felicity books came out just 2 years before American Girl released Addie Walker, a girl whose family took back their freedom in the 1860s. The Addie books, as I understand it, are extremely well done. So what caused American Girl to drop the ball so badly with our 1770s Felicity? Did they succumb to the unfortunate fallacy that slavery only existed in the 19th century? Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, slavery bad. Unlikely. The peek into the past part of this book and the Felicity's World book do speak on slavery. I mean, they're in generalized and extremely outdated ways, but they do speak on the subject, so American Girl absolutely knew what they were dealing with, even before the research for Addie began. Did American Girl want to live in the fantasy world where plantations are just beautiful and relaxing summer locations rather than the site of innumerable transgressions against humanity? Perhaps. Many people still do. Maybe American Girl wanted to protect the children of the 1990s by brushing off the fact that this very interesting character that they were falling in love with was benefiting from an extremely corrupt system. I think we're getting warmer. It's either that or American Girl was just as willfully ignorant as they forced Felicity to be. Maybe it's both. American Girl has never been one to shy away from tough topics. Samantha's best friend lived in a workhouse. In the first chapter of the first Kirsten book, her best friend dies. Lots of people die in these books. Addie was literally enslaved. And then we have Felicity, the daughter of an enslaver. I can see why American Girl might have thought this would be bad for optics. Who wants to look up to a hero like that? I mean, just look at Thomas Jefferson, famed founding father and generally the worst. But the history books don't tell you that. They talk about the Declaration of Independence and the fact that he brought us spaghetti, which he didn't. Protecting children from the uncomfortable realities of human failure isn't going to get us anywhere. When I read Felicity Saves the Day with my daughter, I tried to take the extra time to talk about all of the things that weren't in the book. This wasn't a pleasant conversation, and it really resulted in her being extremely upset about how awful humans can be. I almost felt guilty for bringing it up. And yet, I hope that by having these conversations with my relatively young child, I can prevent her from being ignorantly privileged. When we learn more about the past, we have the opportunity to change the future, and that's one of the reasons I love history so much. For me, dress history is the thing that sits at the forefront of my brain, but there's no point in studying and learning about what 10-year-olds in 1775 would have worn if we don't also understand the context in which these people existed. I decided to do a bit more research to see where Felicity's grandfather's plantation might have actually been. In the book, Felicity says that the plantation is between Williamsburg and Yorktown on the York River, which would put us pretty much exactly in this spot. Interestingly, this just happens to be the former site of Belfield Plantation. Now, Belfield isn't one of the famous ones, and honestly, I'm kind of surprised there's even a plaque here. In its prime, the sweet-scented tobacco grown in this location was highly prized and extremely popular in London. This popularity created a huge profit for the planters of the York River and surrounding areas, but also a huge demand, which by the end of the 17th century was being met primarily by enslaved people rather than indentured servants. Because Yorktown was an incredibly busy port at the time, and the nearby plantations wanted cheap labor, the so-called slave market absolutely thrived in this area. By 1771, over 30,000 enslaved people passed through the port of Yorktown. It's incredibly unfortunate that Felicity's books gloss over the fact that Kings Creek Plantation, also known as Club Grandpa, was made possible by probably hundreds of enslaved people. I don't want to make excuses for American Girl or the choices they made, and I won't. At the same time, I never would have known about the actual history, the ignored facts, the unspoken names behind these books if I hadn't developed a love of the past from Felicity. As a kid, Felicity was someone I would have absolutely loved to have had as a friend, and because of that, I developed an interest in her world, and that's why these books still have value for me. There are so many historians out there that exist because we were huge fans of American Girl in the 90s, and I'm really grateful for that. I don't think deleting Felicity from the narrative is useful, because if her books can still bring more people into the world of history, then we can use that as a gateway to learn more. I know this is super heavy, but I feel a responsibility to acknowledge the background of this world that I've chosen to explore through historical dress. I encourage you to check out the links that I put in the description where you can learn more about these plantations in this area and the legacy they left behind. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon.